The dust had barely settled on Timber Creek's Main Street when Theodora Murphy first heard the whispers about her boy. She was hanging laundry behind her small clapboard house on the edge of town, the sheets billowing like ghosts in the spring breeze of 1876, when she caught the unmistakable sound of children's taunts carrying from the schoolyard. "Where's your pa, Liam? Did he run off 'cause he didn't want you?" A child's voice rang out, followed by cruel laughter. Theodora's hands froze on the damp fabric. She closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself against the familiar pain. At 26, she had grown accustomed to the sideways glances, the hushed conversations that stopped when she entered the general store, the way respectable women pulled their skirts aside when she passed. But her son, her innocent 6-year-old boy, he deserved none of it. "Mama." Liam appeared around the corner of the house, his small face streaked with tears, dark hair tousled from running. "Jimmy Perkins says I ain't got no father." Theodora dropped to her knees, heedless of the dirt soiling her faded blue work dress. "Come here, sweetheart." She pulled him close, feeling his small body tremble against hers. "Don't you mind Jimmy Perkins, he doesn't know anything about us. But he says all boys have fathers, and if I don't, then there's something wrong with me." Liam's voice broke, his brown eyes so like his father's swimming with confusion and hurt. Theodora cupped his face in her hands. "There is nothing wrong with you, Liam Murphy, nothing at all. You are the bravest, smartest, kindest boy in all of Timber Creek." She brushed back his hair, wishing she could as easily sweep away the cruelty of others. "Some families are different, that's all, and ours is just fine with you and me." But as she held her son, Theodora knew that her reassurances weren't enough. In a frontier town like Timber Creek, Wyoming Territory, a woman alone with a child born outside of marriage was marked. And now that mark was being passed to her son. Thomas Murphy, Liam's father, had been a railway man passing through town. His promises of marriage had been as empty as the whiskey bottles he left behind. By the time Theodora discovered she was with child, Thomas was long gone, and her family had disowned her. She'd been 19 then, stubborn and determined to make her own way rather than surrender her baby as her parents had demanded. 7 years later, she'd built a life for herself, and Liam through backbreaking work as a laundress and seamstress. They had a roof over their heads and food on the table, and Theodora had taught herself to ignore the wagging tongues. But she couldn't protect Liam from them forever. That evening, after Liam had fallen asleep in the small bedroom they shared, Theodora sat by the window, mending shirts by lamplight. Her fingers moved mechanically over the fabric while her mind turned over the problem like river stones. She had always told Liam his father was a good man who had to go away before he was born. It wasn't entirely a lie. Thomas Murphy hadn't been a bad man, just a weak one. But that story wouldn't satisfy for much longer. A knock at the door startled her. Visitors were rare at the Murphy home, especially after dark. Theodora set aside her sewing and approached the door cautiously. "Who's there?" she called. "Mrs. Owens sent me," a deep voice answered. "Got some mending needs doing, said you were the one to see." Theodora opened the door to find a tall man standing on her porch, hat in hand. The glow of her lamp caught the glint of a silver sheriff's star on his chest. "Sheriff," she said, instantly wary. Lawmen in her experience were either indifferent to women in her situation or actively hostile. "Madam," he replied with a slight nod. "Sheriff Adam Fletcher, I apologize for the late hour." In the lamplight, she could see he was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30 or so, with sun-weathered skin, keen gray eyes, and a face that spoke of both hardness and fairness. His brown hair was trimmed neatly, though a bit too long by Eastern standards, and a thin scar traced along his jawline. "Mrs. Owens mentioned you do fine work," he continued, holding out a bundle wrapped in brown paper. "Got a tear in my spare coat, needs mending before winter sets in." Theodora hesitated, then took the package. Work was work, and she couldn't afford to turn it away, even from the sheriff. "I can have it done by the end of the week. Much obliged." He didn't move to leave immediately, and his eyes took in the humble interior of her home. "You're Theodora Murphy." "I am." Her chin lifted slightly, bracing for judgment. "Got a boy in school, I hear." Her heart quickened. Yes, Liam, is there some problem? Sheriff Fletcher shook his head. No problem, teacher mentioned him, says he's bright as a new penny. A slight smile softened his features. Just wanted to put a face to the name. Theodora wasn't sure what to make of this. The sheriff showing up at her door just to introduce himself seemed unlikely. Was there something else, Sheriff? He looked at her a moment longer, then seemed to come to a decision. Matter of fact, there is. Heard there was some trouble at the schoolyard today. Wanted to make sure everything was all right. Theodora's throat tightened. Children can be cruel, Sheriff. It's nothing we can't handle. Of course. He settled his hat back on his head. Just so you know, Mrs. Murphy, folks in my town look out for each other. All folks. The emphasis wasn't lost on her. Good night, then. After he left, Theodora stood at the door for a long moment. Sheriff Adam Fletcher was not what she'd expected from Timber Creek's lawman. Most sheriffs she'd encountered were either retired gunmen or political appointees with more ambition than integrity. This man seemed different, observant, thoughtful, but experience had taught her to be cautious of men who seemed too good to be true. She unwrapped the package and found a well-worn but quality leather coat with a tear along one sleeve. It would be simple work, but she'd take extra care with it. In her position, she couldn't afford to do anything less than perfect work for anyone, especially the sheriff. The next morning, Theodora walked Liam to school as usual. The boy dragged his feet, his earlier exuberance for learning dimmed by yesterday's taunts. "Do I have to go, Mama?" he asked as they approached the white schoolhouse. "Yes, you do." Theodora knelt to straighten his collar. "Learning is the most important thing you can do right now, and do you know why?" Liam sighed. "Because knowledge can't be taken away." "That's right," she smiled, touching his cheek. "No matter what anyone says or does, what you learn is yours forever. Now, hold your head high and remember who you are, Liam Murphy, the smartest boy in Timber Creek." He gave her a small smile, but his eyes darted nervously toward the schoolyard where children were already gathering. "I'll be here to pick you up when school lets out," Theodora promised. "And I'm making your favorite for supper, corn fritters." This earned her a more genuine smile before Liam squared his small shoulders and marched toward the schoolhouse. Theodora watched him go, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she couldn't shield him from every hurt. She had deliveries to make clean laundry to the hotel and a mended dress to Mrs. Peterson at the general store before returning home to work on the sheriff's coat. As she walked down Main Street with her basket, she noticed Sheriff Fletcher outside the jailhouse, deep in conversation with a man in a dusty black suit. The stranger had the unmistakable look of a traveling lawman, perhaps a marshal or detective. The sheriff caught sight of her and touched his hat in greeting. Theodora nodded politely and continued on her way, but not before noticing the other man's curious gaze following her. At the general store, Mrs. Peterson was her usual mixture of businesslike and mildly disapproving as she examined the mended dress. "Fine work as always, Mrs. Murphy," she said, counting out coins into Theodora's palm. "Though I do wonder how you find the time with a child to raise alone and all." "I manage," Theodora replied evenly, tucking the money into her pocket. 6 years in Timber Creek had taught her to let such comments slide away like water off oiled canvas. "I heard there was some unpleasantness at the school yesterday, Mrs. Peterson continued, arranging bolts of fabric with precise movements. "Children can be so thoughtless," Theodora tensed. "Yes, they can, especially when they're repeating what they hear at home." Mrs. Peterson had the grace to flush slightly. "Well, I'm sure Miss Hayes handled it appropriately." "I'm sure she did." Theodora turned to leave, then paused. "Mrs. Peterson, do you know if the sheriff has lived in Timber Creek long?" The older woman looked surprised at the question. "Sheriff Fletcher, going on 3 years now, came from somewhere in Colorado, I believe. Why do you ask?" "No reason in particular. He brought me some mending, that's all." Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows rose. "Did he now?" "Well, he's a good man, the sheriff. Keeps to himself mostly, but fair. Turned this town around after that dreadful business with the last sheriff and those cattle rustlers." She leaned forward confidentially. "They say he was a bounty hunter before he took the badge, tracked down some terrible outlaws in his day." Theodora thanked her for the information and left, mulling over this new knowledge. A former bounty hunter would explain the watchful eyes and the scar along his jaw. It didn't surprise her most men who wore badges in these parts had violent pasts, but it did make her wonder what had brought him to Timber Creek and why he'd taken an interest in her and Liam's situation. The afternoon passed quickly as Theodora worked on various mending projects, including the sheriff's coat. The leather was supple and well cared for despite its age, and she found herself admiring the craftsmanship as she repaired the tear with nearly invisible stitches. At 3 o'clock, she set aside her work and hurried to the schoolhouse to meet Liam. The children poured out the door like water from a broken dam, their voices high and excited after hours of enforced quiet. Theodora scanned the crowd anxiously, relaxing only when she spotted Liam's dark head. But her relief was short-lived. Jimmy Perkins and 2 other boys had surrounded Liam at the bottom of the steps. "Look, it's the boy with no pa," Jimmy taunted, loud enough for everyone to hear. "My pa says your ma's that's quite enough, Jimmy Perkins." The voice that cut through the schoolyard wasn't Theodora's, but Sheriff Fletcher's. He strode across the yard, his presence immediately commanding attention. A man watches his words carefully, especially around ladies and children. Jimmy's face went pale. "Yes, sir, Sheriff." Fletcher turned to Liam, who stood rigid, his small fists clenched at his sides. To Theodora's surprise, the sheriff crouched down to Liam's level. "You must be Liam Murphy," he said, his voice carrying just enough for those nearby to hear. "Your teacher tells me you're the best reader in your class." Liam nodded, confusion replacing the anger and humiliation on his face. "Well then," Fletcher continued, "I've been looking for someone to help me organize some wanted posters at the office. Got to be able to read names and descriptions. Think you might be interested in earning a penny or two after school sometime?" Liam's eyes widened. "Yes, sir, good man." The sheriff straightened and, in a gesture that silenced the schoolyard, removed his hat and placed it gently on Liam's head. It was far too large, sliding down over his ears. "You know what, son? Any boy who can read as well as you do and helps his mother the way you do has got plenty to be proud of, and from where I stand, you've got a father now." The hat, the words, the public declaration, it was like a thunderclap in the quiet schoolyard. Theodora felt the breath leave her body. Parents who had come to collect their children stared. Miss Hayes, the schoolteacher, stood frozen on the steps, her mouth slightly open. Liam reached up to touch the brim of the hat, his face transformed with wonder and a fragile hope that made Theodora's heart clench. Sheriff Fletcher turned to face the other children. "Liam here is under my protection now. Anyone has a problem with him, they've got a problem with me. Understood?" Nods all around, especially from Jimmy Perkins, who looked as though he might be sick. Then the sheriff turned to Theodora, and for the first time she saw uncertainty in his gray eyes. He'd overstepped, intervened in her life and her son's in a way that was both public and irreversible, and he was suddenly aware of it. "Mrs. Murphy," he said, touching his forehead in the gesture of a man who would have tipped his hat if he were still wearing it. "Hope I haven't caused offense." Theodora couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She could only shake her head, overwhelmed by what he had done. This man had just put his reputation, the most valuable currency a lawman possessed, on the line for her son. "Sheriff Fletcher," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know how to thank you." A smile quirked the corner of his mouth. "No thanks needed, madam, just upholding the peace." He turned back to Liam. "That hat's a mite big for you now, but you'll grow into it. Why don't you come by the office tomorrow after school and we'll talk about those posters?" "Yes, sir," Liam beamed, holding the hat on his head with both hands. As the sheriff walked away, the crowd of onlookers began to disperse, many giving Theodora and Liam curious glances. Miss Hayes approached them, her expression a mixture of concern and approval. "Mrs. Murphy," she said quietly, "that was quite something. The sheriff doesn't involve himself in schoolyard matters as a rule." "I didn't ask him to," Theodora replied, still processing what had happened. Miss Hayes smiled. "I don't believe you had to. Sheriff Fletcher sees more than most people realize." She patted Liam's shoulder. "You did very well with your reading today, Liam. Keep practicing." On the walk home, Liam wouldn't stop talking about the sheriff and the wanted posters and how he was going to help catch outlaws. The hat kept slipping over his eyes, but he refused to take it off, adjusting it again and again with determined little hands. "Mama, did you see? Sheriff Fletcher gave me his hat, right in front of everybody." Liam's face glowed with pride. "And he said I've got a father now. Does that mean he's going to be my pa?" Theodora's step faltered. "Liam, honey, I think the sheriff was just being kind. He meant that he'll look out for you like a father would." "But he gave me his hat," Liam insisted, "and he said I could help at his office. That's what pa's do, isn't it? They teach their boys things." "Yes, they do," Theodora said carefully. "But Sheriff Fletcher is very busy keeping the town safe. He might not have a lot of time for teaching." Liam considered this, pushing the hat back from his eyes. "Maybe, but he still said I've got a father now, and everybody heard him say it." Theodora couldn't argue with that. Everyone had heard, and by sundown, the entire town would know what Adam Fletcher had done. She didn't know whether to be grateful or mortified. The sheriff's gesture would certainly put an end to Jimmy Perkins's taunts, but it also tied her and Liam to him in the public mind. In a town like Timber Creek, that connection would be fodder for gossip for months to come, and yet she couldn't deny the lightness in her heart at seeing Liam so happy, so proud. For the first time since arriving in Timber Creek, her son walked with his head held high, unashamed. When they reached their house, Theodora was surprised to see a package on the porch steps. Liam ran ahead to investigate. "It's got your name on it, Mama," he called. Theodora picked up the brown paper-wrapped bundle. There was indeed a note attached with her name written in a firm, clear hand. Inside, she found a small wooden horse, expertly carved and polished to a soft shine. The note read simply, "For the boy, AF." She turned the carving over in her hands, noting the detailed mane and the careful rendering of muscles beneath the wooden hide. It was the work of someone with both skill and patience. Sheriff Adam Fletcher, it seemed, was a man of hidden depths. "Look, Mama," Liam exclaimed when she showed him the horse. "It's just like the one Sheriff Fletcher rides. Can I keep it in my pocket when I go help him tomorrow?" "Of course you can," Theodora said, watching as her son examined the carving with reverent fingers. "But be careful with it. It's very special." That night, after Liam had finally fallen asleep, the hat and wooden horse carefully placed beside his bed, Theodora sat by the window again, her mind turning over the events of the day. Sheriff Fletcher's intervention had been unexpected and, if she was honest with herself, deeply moving. No one had stood up for her or Liam that way before, but why had he done it? Sheriffs generally didn't involve themselves in the affairs of women like her unless there was trouble. And while Adam Fletcher seemed different from other lawmen she'd encountered, experience had taught her to be wary of men's motives, especially when they showed kindness to women in vulnerable positions. The next day, after finishing her laundry work early, Theodora made her way to the sheriff's office with his mended coat. She told herself it was simply to return his property and perhaps thank him properly for his kindness to Liam. But in truth, she wanted to understand what had prompted his actions. The jailhouse was a solid brick building that stood apart from the wooden structures that made up most of Timber Creek. A sign over the door read "Sheriff" in plain black letters. Through the window, Theodora could see Adam Fletcher at his desk, head bent over papers. She hesitated at the door, suddenly unsure of herself. What if he regretted his impulsive gesture at the schoolyard? What if he had simply felt sorry for them? Pity was something she could not abide, not after working so hard to build a respectable life for herself and Liam. Before she could decide whether to enter or walk away, the door opened and Sheriff Fletcher stood there, hat in hand. "Mrs. Murphy," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I was just heading out to make rounds." "I've brought your coat," she said, holding out the wrapped package. "The tear is mended. Thank you, that was quick work." He took the package and gestured inside. "Would you like to come in for a moment? It's more comfortable than standing on the boardwalk." Theodora nodded and followed him into the office. It was neat and orderly, with a desk, a gun rack, and a row of 3 cells at the back, all empty at present. A small stove in the corner gave off gentle heat, taking the chill from the early spring air. "Please have a seat." He indicated a wooden chair beside the desk, then sat down himself, setting her package aside. "What brings you by, besides returning my coat, that is?" Theodora smoothed her skirts, gathering her courage. "I wanted to thank you properly for what you did yesterday, for Liam." Fletcher's expression softened. "No thanks necessary, Mrs. Murphy. I meant what I said. Your boy deserves better than to be taunted for something that's not his fault." "Even so, it was kind of you, and the wooden horse Liam treasures it already." A hint of color touched the sheriff's weathered cheeks. "It's nothing. Whittling passes the time on quiet nights." Theodora studied him, trying to decipher the man behind the badge. "May I ask why, Sheriff?" "Why involve yourself in our troubles? Most men in your position wouldn't bother." Fletcher was silent for a moment, his gray eyes thoughtful. "I suppose because I know what it's like to be the boy everyone looks down on." He tapped his fingers on the desk, a gesture that suggested he was choosing his words carefully. "My mother raised me alone after my father died in the war. Times were hard, people were cruel, and I remember wishing someone would stand up for us just once." The simple honesty of his answer caught Theodora off guard. It wasn't pity that had motivated him, but understanding. "I see. Besides," he continued, "a sheriff's job isn't just about chasing outlaws and keeping drunks in line. It's about making sure everyone in town feels safe." "That includes your boy and me." The question slipped out before Theodora could stop it. His eyes met hers directly. "Yes, Mrs. Murphy, you too." There was a weight to his words that stirred something long dormant in Theodora, a feeling of being seen, truly seen, by someone who didn't judge her for her past. The moment was broken by the sound of running feet on the boardwalk outside. The door burst open, and Liam appeared, breathless and beaming, Miss Hayes a few steps behind him. "Sheriff Fletcher, I came to help with the posters like you said." Liam wore the sheriff's hat, which still fell over his eyes, and clutched the wooden horse in one hand. Fletcher's serious expression melted into a warm smile. "Right on time, Deputy Murphy. Miss Hayes let you out early. I thought perhaps Liam could start his special assignment today," the teacher said, her eyes twinkling. He was so excited he could hardly focus on his letters. "Well, we can't have that," Fletcher said solemnly. "Education comes first, isn't that right, Deputy?" Liam nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir, but I finished all my work real fast so I could come help." "Is that so?" Fletcher looked to Miss Hayes for confirmation. "Indeed he did," she replied. "Worked harder than I've ever seen him work before. Then I guess we'd better get started on those posters." Fletcher stood and moved to a cabinet in the corner. "Mrs. Murphy, would it be all right if Liam stays here for an hour or so? I promise to have him home before supper." Theodora looked from the sheriff to her son's hopeful face. How could she deny him this moment of pride and belonging? "That would be fine. I have some errands to run anyway." "Excellent." Fletcher pulled out a stack of papers and set them on the desk. "Now, Deputy Murphy, these wanted posters need to be organized by the outlaw's name. Think you can help me with that?" Liam straightened to his full height, pushing the hat back from his eyes. "Yes, sir." As Theodora left the sheriff's office, she heard Fletcher explaining the alphabet system they would use to file the posters. Miss Hayes fell into step beside her as they walked down the boardwalk. "That was a remarkable thing the sheriff did yesterday," the teacher said quietly. "I've never seen him take such a personal interest before." "I'm grateful," Theodora admitted, "though I worry about what people will say." Miss Hayes laughed softly. "Oh, they're saying plenty already, but mostly they're saying that Sheriff Fletcher must think very highly of you and your son." "I've given them no reason to think that. Perhaps the sheriff sees something others have missed." Miss Hayes touched Theodora's arm lightly. "You know, Mrs. Murphy, not everyone in town judges you as harshly as you might think. You've worked hard, raised a fine boy, kept to yourself. There's respect in that." Theodora wasn't sure how to respond. She'd been so focused on surviving, on making sure Liam had what he needed, that she'd never considered whether anyone in Timber Creek might actually respect her. "Thank you for saying so," she finally replied. "And thank you for being kind to Liam. He loves school because of you." He's a bright child with a good heart. It's easy to be kind to such a boy." Miss Hayes smiled and bid her goodbye at the corner, heading toward her own lodgings. Theodora continued on to the general store to purchase a few necessities: flour, coffee, and a bit of sugar, her mind still turning over the sheriff's words. He had spoken of making sure everyone felt safe, and for the first time in years, she realized that she did feel safer knowing he was watching over the town over them. Mrs. Peterson was unusually friendly when Theodora entered the store, inquiring after Liam and commenting on the fine weather. Word of the sheriff's actions had clearly spread, changing how people viewed her overnight. It was both gratifying and unsettling to be treated with such sudden consideration. As she was leaving with her purchases, she nearly collided with a tall man entering the store. It was the stranger she'd seen talking with the sheriff the day before. "Pardon me, madam," he said, stepping aside to let her pass. "No harm done," Theodora replied, but she felt his eyes on her as she walked away, a curious assessment that made her uneasy. When she arrived home, Theodora busied herself with household chores, but her thoughts kept returning to Sheriff Adam Fletcher. There was something about him that intrigued her: his quiet strength, his unexpected kindness, the way he spoke to Liam as if the boy mattered. It had been a long time since any man had treated either of them with such respect. True to his word, Fletcher brought Liam home before supper, walking beside the boy as Liam chattered excitedly about the work they'd done. "He's a natural organizer, Mrs. Murphy," Fletcher said as they reached the small porch of her house. "Got through half the stack in no time. Did you catch any outlaws, Liam?" Theodora asked, smiling at her son's enthusiasm. "Not yet, Mama, but Sheriff Fletcher says we might tomorrow. He's going to teach me how to spot clues like a real detective." Liam could barely contain himself, bouncing on his toes with excitement. "That sounds very educational," Theodora said, exchanging an amused glance with the sheriff. "Why don't you go wash up for supper? There's water in the basin." When Liam had disappeared inside, Fletcher cleared his throat. "I hope you don't mind, Mrs. Murphy. The boy's eager to learn, and I thought it might help with his reading if he had something interesting to practice on." "I don't mind at all, Sheriff. Liam's happier than I've seen him in a long time." She hesitated, then added, "But I'm concerned about the time you're taking from your duties. Surely the sheriff has more important things to do than entertain a 6-year-old boy." Fletcher's expression grew serious. "There's nothing more important than helping a child find his place in the world, Mrs. Murphy. Besides, Timber Creek's peaceful enough these days. A few hours with Liam isn't going to leave the town unprotected." Theodora studied him, trying to reconcile this thoughtful man with the hardened bounty hunter Mrs. Peterson had described. "You're very kind, Sheriff Adam," he said suddenly. "When we're not in public, I mean, if that's not too forward." The request surprised her. It suggested a familiarity, a connection beyond the polite interactions of townspeople. "All right, Adam, and you may call me Theodora if you wish." A smile touched his eyes. "Theodora, that's a beautiful name." "My father was fond of Greek history," she explained, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks at the compliment. "It means gift of God. It suits you." He glanced toward the door where Liam had gone. "Your boy is certainly a gift, smart as a whip and brave too." Standing up to those bigger boys took courage. Pride swelled in Theodora's heart. "He is brave. He's had to be." Adam nodded, understanding in his gaze. "Life isn't always easy on the frontier, especially for those facing it alone." He settled his hat on his head. "Well, I should let you get to your supper. Would it be all right if Liam comes by the office again tomorrow after school? I promise I'll see him home before dark. Of course, he'll be looking forward to it all day." Theodora hesitated, then added impulsively, "Perhaps you'd like to stay for supper sometime, as a thank you for your kindness to Liam." The invitation hung in the air between them, more significant than it should have been for a simple meal. "I'd like that very much, Theodora," Adam replied, his voice warm. "How about Friday evening?" "Friday would be perfect. We eat at 6. I'll be here." He touched the brim of his hat in farewell and turned to go, then paused. "By the way, I checked on that coat. Fine work." "Can hardly see where the tear was." Thank you, Theodora said, pleased by the compliment to her skills. I take pride in my work. As you should. Good night, Theodora. As she watched him walk away, Theodora felt a flutter of anticipation at the thought of Friday's supper. It had been years since she'd invited anyone to her home, let alone a man. But there was something about Adam Fletcher that made her want to know him better, to understand the man behind the badge and the unexpected kindness he had shown her son. Inside, Liam was waiting at the table, his face glowing with excitement. Mama, Sheriff Fletcher says I'm a natural deputy. He let me file all the posters and even showed me how to use the telegraph machine. He says maybe someday I can be a real lawman like him. Theodora smiled as she began serving their simple meal of beans and cornbread. Is that what you want to be when you grow up? A lawman, Liam nodded vigorously. Sheriff Fletcher says a good lawman has to be smart and fair and brave. He says I'm already smart and the rest will come with practice. He's right about you being smart, Theodora said, sitting down across from him. And I think you're already brave and fair too. He asked me about my pa today, Liam said, his tone suddenly serious. I told him what you always told me, that he had to go away before I was born. Theodora's hand stilled on her spoon. What did the sheriff say to that? He said that sometimes men make mistakes they can't fix, and that doesn't mean they didn't care, just that they weren't strong enough to do the right thing. Liam looked up at her, his brown eyes thoughtful. Is that true, Mama? Was my real pa not strong enough? Theodora considered her answer carefully. She had never spoken ill of Thomas Murphy to Liam, believing that a child should not bear the burden of a parent's failings. But she hadn't told him the full truth either. Your father was a man with dreams bigger than his courage, she finally said. He wanted to see the world to make his fortune, but when it came time to make hard choices, to stand by his promises, yes, I think perhaps he wasn't strong enough. Liam absorbed this, his young face solemn. Sheriff Fletcher is strong enough, isn't he? He's not afraid of anything. I'm sure the sheriff has his fears, like all men do, Theodora replied gently, but yes, he seems to be a man who stands by his word. That's why he gave me his hat, Liam declared confidently. Because he meant what he said about being my pa now. Theodora didn't know how to respond to that. She didn't want to encourage false hopes in her son, but neither did she want to dismiss the genuine connection forming between Liam and Adam Fletcher. So she simply smiled and changed the subject to Liam's schoolwork, letting her son's excited chatter about his day wash over her. Later, after Liam was asleep, Theodora sat by the window again, her sewing forgotten in her lap as she gazed at the stars scattered across the Wyoming sky. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder what it might be like to have someone to share her burdens, to help raise Liam, to fill the empty space beside her at night. It was a dangerous line of thought. She had learned the hard way that dreams could shatter like glass, leaving painful shards embedded in one's heart. And yet, something about Adam Fletcher made her want to risk dreaming again. The next few days fell into a new pattern. Liam would go to school in the morning, and Theodora would walk him there, no longer seeing fear in his steps as they approached the schoolyard. After school, he would spend an hour or two at the sheriff's office before coming home full of stories about outlaws and tracking, and how Adam was teaching him to read maps of the territory. Jimmy Perkins and the other boys left Liam alone now. In fact, several children had begun to look at Liam with a new respect, asking him questions about the sheriff's work and whether he'd seen any real criminals in the jail cells. Theodora continued her laundry and mending work, but she found herself taking a different route through town, one that often passed by the sheriff's office. Sometimes she would catch a glimpse of Adam at his desk through the window, or see him walking his rounds, always with a nod and a touch of his hat when he spotted her. The stranger in the black suit remained in town, often seen in conversation with Adam or studying wanted posters outside the post office. Theodora learned from Mrs. Peterson that he was a Pinkerton detective named Daniel Warren, investigating a series of train robberies along the Union Pacific line. They say he's after the Caldwell gang, Mrs. Peterson told her in hushed tones when Theodora came to deliver clean linens to the store. Terrible outlaws robbed 3 trains in Colorado and killed a conductor. Sheriff Fletcher's been helping him track their movements. Are they dangerous? Theodora asked, immediately thinking of Liam spending time at the sheriff's office. Oh my, yes. But don't you worry, Mrs. Murphy. They're likely miles from here by now. The detective's just gathering information. Mrs. Peterson leaned closer. I heard Sheriff Fletcher invited himself to supper at your house tomorrow night. Is that true? Theodora felt heat rise to her face. I invited him, actually, as a thank you for his kindness to Liam. Is that so? Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows arched with undisguised interest. Well, the sheriff's a fine catch for any woman, never married, you know. They say he was engaged once back in Colorado, but she died of fever before the wedding. Tragic. Theodora hadn't known that. The thought of Adam experiencing such a loss made her heart ache for him. That is sad. Yes, well, life goes on, doesn't it? And speaking of life going on, Mrs. Owens mentioned you might be interested in taking on some regular sewing for the hotel. New curtains for all the rooms, quite a big job. I would be interested, yes, Theodora said, grateful for the change of subject. Please tell Mrs. Owens I can start next week. By the time Friday arrived, Theodora was unaccountably nervous about the supper she had planned. She spent the morning cleaning their small house until it shone, then used some of her carefully saved money to purchase a chicken from Mr. Peterson's butcher counter at the back of the general store. Special occasion? He asked as he wrapped the bird in brown paper. Just a thank you supper, Theodora replied, keeping her tone light, Mr. Peterson's knowing smile told her that everyone in town was aware of the sheriff's expected visit to her home. Well, he's partial to apple pie, if you're wondering. Mrs. Fletcher used to make it for the church socials before she passed. Theodora thanked him for the information, though she hadn't planned on baking a pie, but the idea took hold, and she found herself adding apples and cinnamon to her purchases. The afternoon was spent cooking. She roasted the chicken with herbs from her small garden, made biscuits from scratch, and prepared a simple apple pie that filled the house with a comforting aroma. Liam helped by peeling potatoes and setting the table with their best and only dishes. Is Sheriff Fletcher really coming for supper? He asked for the 3rd time, carefully placing forks beside the plates. Yes, he is, Theodora answered patiently, and you must remember to call him Sheriff when he's here, not Adam. But he told me to call him Adam when we're working in his office, Liam protested. That's different. When he's our guest for supper, it's more respectful to use his title. Liam considered this. But if he's going to be my pa, shouldn't I call him Pa? Theodora nearly dropped the bowl she was holding. Liam, we've talked about this. Sheriff Fletcher was being kind when he said that. He's not actually going to be your father. But he gave me his hat, Liam insisted, his lower lip jutting out stubbornly. And he teaches me things every day, and Jimmy Perkins doesn't tease me anymore because everyone knows Sheriff Fletcher is looking out for me. Theodora knelt in front of her son, taking his small hands in hers. Liam, honey, I know you want a father very much, and Sheriff Fletcher has been wonderfully kind to you, but that doesn't mean he's going to be your pa. He has an important job protecting the town, and someday he might want to have a family of his own. But we could be his family, Liam said, his brown eyes wide and hopeful. You and me, don't you like him, Mama? The question, so innocent and direct, caught Theodora off guard. Did she like Adam Fletcher? Yes, more than she wanted to admit, even to herself. But liking someone wasn't enough to build a family on, especially not with her history. I do like him, she said carefully. He's a good man, but there's more to being a family than just liking someone. Like what? Liam pressed, like love and trust and wanting the same things from life. Theodora smoothed his hair back from his forehead. Those things take time to grow, Liam. They can't be rushed. Liam seemed to accept this explanation, though not entirely happily, but they could grow right. If we gave them time, Theodora couldn't help smiling at his persistence. I suppose anything's possible. Now go wash up properly. Our guest will be here soon. At precisely 6 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Theodora smoothed her best dress, a simple blue cotton with white trim that she had made herself, and opened the door to find Adam Fletcher standing on her porch, hat in hand, and a small bunch of wildflowers in the other. "Evening, Theodora," he said, and she noticed he had trimmed his hair and beard for the occasion. He wore a clean white shirt under his vest, his badge polished to a shine on his chest. "These are for you, found them growing by the creek this morning." Theodora accepted the flowers, touched by the simple gesture. "Thank you, Adam, they're lovely. Please come in." Adam stepped inside, ducking slightly to avoid the low door frame. He glanced around the small but neat home with appreciation. "Something smells wonderful. Chicken." Liam announced, rushing forward, "And Mama made apple pie because Mr. Peterson said it's your favorite." Adam raised an eyebrow at Theodora, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Is that so? Well, you've been doing some investigating, Mrs. Murphy." Theodora felt her cheeks warm. "It seemed only polite to prepare something you'd enjoy. Sheriff Fletcher," Liam tugged at Adam's sleeve. "I organized all your wanted posters like you showed me, and Miss Hayes said my reading is getting better every day." "That's fine work, Deputy," Adam replied seriously. "A lawman needs to keep improving his skills." Theodora watched the easy way Adam interacted with her son, the gentle respect in his voice, and felt something loosen in her chest. Whatever his reasons for taking an interest in Liam, the connection between them was genuine. "Supper's ready if you'd like to sit down," she said, gesturing to the table. The meal was more relaxed than Theodora had anticipated. Adam proved to be a good conversationalist, sharing stories about his days as a young deputy in Colorado that had Liam wide-eyed with excitement and even made Theodora laugh. He asked thoughtful questions about her work and praised her cooking with sincere appreciation. "This chicken is better than anything they serve at the hotel," he declared, accepting a second helping. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother," Theodora replied. "Before," she trailed off, not wanting to bring up painful memories. Adam nodded, understanding without needing her to explain. "Well, she taught you well. My own mother could burn water, I swear. I learned to cook in self-defense." This surprising admission made Theodora smile. "You cook simple things. Beans, bacon, cornbread if I'm feeling ambitious." Nothing like this feast. As they ate, Theodora found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't with anyone in years. There was something about Adam Fletcher that put her at ease, his straightforward manner, perhaps, or the respect with which he treated both her and Liam. After the pie had been served and enthusiastically praised, Liam began to droop in his chair, the excitement of the day catching up with him. "I think it's time for someone to get ready for bed," Theodora said, noting her son's heavy eyelids. "But Sheriff Fletcher is still here," Liam protested weakly. "And I need to be heading back to the office soon," Adam said, standing from the table. "Got to make my evening rounds, but I'll see you tomorrow, Deputy. We've got more work to do on those maps, remember?" This promise satisfied Liam, who allowed Theodora to send him to wash up and change into his nightshirt. While he was out of the room, Theodora began clearing the table, Adam helping despite her protests. "You don't need to do that," she said as he carried plates to the wash basin. "My mother raised me better than to sit while a lady cleans up," he replied, rolling up his sleeves. "Besides, I'm used to doing my own dishes." They worked side by side in companionable silence for a few moments, Theodora washing and Adam drying. "Thank you for supper," he said quietly. "It's been a long time since I had a home-cooked meal in a real home. It's the least I could do after your kindness to Liam." Theodora handed him a clean plate. "He adores you, you know." Adam's expression softened. "He's a good boy. Reminds me of myself at that age, full of questions and eager to prove himself." "He thinks you meant it literally when you said he had a father now," Theodora said, feeling she should warn him. "I've tried to explain that you were just being kind, but he wants it to be true," Adam finished for her. "I understand I should have been more careful with my words." Theodora shook her head. "No, what you did it was wonderful. You gave him something he needed desperately, pride, a sense of belonging. I just worry about him being disappointed when." "When what?" Adam asked, his gray eyes studying her face. "When you move on," Theodora said softly. "When you find a wife and have a family of your own, Liam will be heartbroken." Adam set down the dish he was drying and turned to face her fully. Theodora, I don't plan on going anywhere. Timber Creek is my home now, and as for a wife and family." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I've had those hopes before, yes, but life doesn't always go according to plan. Mrs. Peterson mentioned you were engaged once," Theodora said, then immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry, that's not my business." "No, it's all right." Adam's voice was steady, though his eyes held old pain. "Her name was Elizabeth. She died of scarlet fever 3 weeks before our wedding." "That was 5 years ago." "I'm so sorry, Adam," he nodded, acknowledging her sympathy. "For a long time after, I didn't think I'd ever want that life again. Threw myself into my work, tracking outlaws, moving from town to town. It was easier than staying in one place with the memories." "What changed?" Theodora asked, genuinely curious. A slight smile touched his lips. "I got older. Wiser, maybe, realized that living half a life wasn't really living at all. When the sheriff's position opened up here in Timber Creek, it seemed like a sign to put down roots again." Theodora understood that feeling all too well, the desire for stability, for a place to belong. "And have you put down roots, I mean, starting to," he replied, his gaze holding hers. "Found some reasons to stay." There was something in the way he looked at her that made Theodora's heart beat faster. Before she could respond, Liam called from the bedroom. "Mama, I'm ready for my story." The moment broken, Theodora stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they had been standing. "I should go to him." "Of course." Adam rolled down his sleeves and reached for his hat. "Thank you again for supper. It was the best meal I've had in years." "You're welcome anytime," Theodora said, and meant it. Adam paused at the door. "I'd like to take you and Liam fishing on Sunday if you're agreeable. There's a nice spot on the creek not far from town, plenty of trout this time of year." The invitation surprised and pleased her. "That sounds lovely. Liam has never been fishing." "Then it's high time he learned. I'll come by after church around noon. We'll be ready." After Adam left, Theodora went to Liam's bedroom to find him already tucked in bed, the sheriff's hat on the pillow beside him and the wooden horse clutched in his hand. "Did Sheriff Fletcher go home?" he asked sleepily. "Yes, but he's taking us fishing on Sunday," Theodora told him as she sat on the edge of the bed. "Would you like that?" Liam's eyes widened. "Really, both of us," she confirmed. "He says there's a good spot on the creek where we can catch trout." "I've never been fishing before," Liam said, excitement momentarily overcoming his tiredness. "Do you think he'll let me use his fishing pole?" "I'm sure he will." Theodora smoothed the blanket over him. "Now, what story would you like tonight?" "Tell me about the brave sheriff who saved the town from outlaws," Liam requested, his eyes already beginning to close. Theodora smiled and began to weave a tale about a courageous lawman who protected his town from danger. Watching as her son drifted off to sleep, the sheriff's hat still beside him on the pillow. As she prepared for bed herself, Theodora found her thoughts returning to Adam Fletcher, to the warmth in his eyes when he spoke to Liam, the careful way he had shared his past with her, the gentle strength that seemed to radiate from him. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different future than the one she had resigned herself to, a future that included someone to share her life with, someone who would be a father to Liam and perhaps more children someday. It was a dangerous dream, she knew. But as she drifted off to sleep, Theodora couldn't help but hold it close to her heart. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect Wyoming spring day. Theodora had deliveries to make in town, and Liam insisted on wearing the sheriff's hat despite her concerns that it might get damaged. "Sheriff Fletcher said I could wear it whenever I wanted," he declared as they walked toward Main Street. "He said it's mine now." "All right," Theodora conceded, "but be careful with it. It's very special." The town was busier than usual for a Saturday morning. A cattle drive had passed through the previous day, and several cowboys were still in town, spending their wages at the saloon or restocking supplies before heading back to their ranches. Theodora made her deliveries quickly, wanting to finish her errands before the town became too rowdy. Cowboys often drank heavily on their days off, and while most were harmless, she preferred to keep Liam away from such influences. They were just leaving the general store when a commotion further down the street caught their attention. A group of men on horseback were riding into town, dust rising from beneath their horses' hooves. Something about their appearance, the way they rode, the rifles visible in their saddle scabbards, made Theodora instinctively pull Liam closer to her side. "Mama, who are those men?" Liam asked, peering curiously at the newcomers. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I think we should head home now." Theodora turned to guide Liam in the opposite direction, but it was too late. "Well, look what we have here," a deep voice called out. "A fine little deputy." Theodora turned to see one of the riders had stopped his horse directly behind them. He was a large man with a thick beard and cold eyes that assessed them with unsettling interest. His gaze fixed on the sheriff's hat that Liam wore. "That's a mighty big hat for such a small boy," the man said, his tone falsely friendly. "Where'd you get it, son?" Before Liam could answer, Theodora stepped forward. "Excuse us, sir, we need to be getting home." The man ignored her, his attention still on Liam. "That wouldn't be Sheriff Fletcher's hat, would it now? I recognize that silver band." Liam, oblivious to the tension, nodded proudly. "Sheriff Fletcher gave it to me. He said I'm his deputy now." A slow, unpleasant smile spread across the man's face. "Is that right?" "Well, you must be a very special boy then. The sheriff must think highly of you and your mama." Something in his tone made Theodora's blood run cold. She tightened her grip on Liam's shoulder. "We really must be going." "Of course, madam," the man said, touching his own hat with exaggerated politeness. "Wouldn't want to keep you. Just tell the sheriff that Hank Caldwell says hello, would you? Tell him I'm looking forward to catching up on old times, Caldwell." The name registered immediately for Mrs. Peterson's gossip, the Caldwell gang, the outlaws the Pinkerton detective was hunting. Theodora fought to keep her expression neutral as fear tightened her chest. "I'll pass along the message," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Good day to you, sir." She turned and walked away as calmly as she could, steering Liam toward home. She could feel Hank Caldwell's eyes on them as they retreated, and it took all her willpower not to break into a run. "Mama, who was that man?" Liam asked once they were a safe distance away. "Just a traveler passing through," Theodora replied, trying to keep her voice light. "But I think we should tell Sheriff Fletcher about him when we see him tomorrow." "He knew Sheriff Fletcher's hat," Liam observed. "Are they friends?" "I don't think so, sweetheart. Now let's hurry home. I have sewing to finish before Sunday." As soon as they reached their house, Theodora sent Liam to play in the backyard while she paced the small front room, debating what to do. The Caldwell gang was in Timber Creek, and they had taken notice of her and Liam because of the sheriff's hat. The connection Adam had established to protect Liam from schoolyard bullies had now potentially put him in danger from something far worse. She needed to warn Adam immediately. But leaving the house again meant potentially encountering Hank Caldwell or his men in town. And sending Liam alone was out of the question. Her decision was made for her when a knock came at the door. Theodora approached cautiously, relief flooding through her when she heard Adam's voice. "Theodora, it's Adam. Are you home?" She opened the door quickly, pulling him inside. "Thank God you're here. I was just trying to figure out how to get word to you." Adam's expression was grave. "You've seen them then?" "Hank Caldwell spoke to us outside the general store," Theodora confirmed. "He recognized your hat on Liam. Said to tell you he was looking forward to catching up on old times." Adam's jaw tightened. "Where's Liam now?" "In the backyard." "Adam, who are these men? What do they want?" Adam moved to the window, carefully looking out at the street before answering. "The Caldwell gang, train robbers, killers. Hank Caldwell and I have history. I arrested his younger brother 3 years ago in Colorado. The boy was hanged for murder. And now he's come here for revenge," Theodora said, understanding immediately. Adam nodded grimly. "Looks that way. Detective Warren got word they were heading this direction, but we didn't expect them so soon." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Theodora, I need you and Liam to pack a few things. You can't stay here tonight." "Where will we go?" "The hotel. I've already spoken to Mrs. Owens. She's preparing a room for you at the back of the building, away from the street. I've deputized some of the ranch hands in town, and they'll keep watch." Theodora felt a chill at the precautions. "You think they would come after us? Why, we're nothing to them." Adam's eyes met hers directly. They've seen Liam wearing my hat. They've made the connection between us. Hank Caldwell is the type of man who strikes at what he perceives as a weakness. He hesitated, then added more gently, and people in town have been talking about us, about our friendship. Theodora understood immediately. Town gossip had painted her and Liam as important to Adam, and now Hank Caldwell thought he could use them to get to him. "This is my fault," Adam said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I should have been more careful. Giving Liam my hat, spending time with him publicly, I might as well have painted a target on both of you." "No," Theodora said firmly. "You did a kind thing for a child who needed it. You couldn't have known this would happen." Adam's expression softened slightly. "You're too forgiving, Theodora. But we don't have time to argue about it now. Please get Liam and pack what you need for a night or two. I'll take you to the hotel myself." Theodora nodded and went to call Liam from the backyard. As she quickly gathered a change of clothes for each of them and a few of Liam's treasured possessions, including the wooden horse, she tried to keep her fear from showing on her face. Liam was excited about the unexpected adventure of staying at the hotel, and she didn't want to frighten him with the truth. "Is this because of that man who talked to us?" Liam asked as they prepared to leave. He was more perceptive than she sometimes gave him credit for. "Yes," Theodora answered honestly. "Sheriff Fletcher wants to make sure we're safe while those men are in town." "Because they're bad men," Liam pressed. "Yes, they are, but the sheriff knows how to handle them, and our job is to do exactly what he says so he can do his job properly." This explanation satisfied Liam, who nodded seriously. "I'll help protect you, Mama," he declared, setting the sheriff's hat firmly on his head. Adam returned from checking the street outside. "Coast is clear for now. My deputy's waiting at the corner to escort us to the hotel. Stay close to me, both of you." The walk to the hotel was tense, with Adam's hand never far from his holstered pistol. His deputy, a young man named Tom Jenkins, walked behind them, his own hand similarly poised. The few townspeople on the street watched their progress with concerned expressions, news of the Caldwell gang's arrival having spread quickly. Mrs. Owens, the hotel proprietor, met them at the side entrance, her usually cheerful face solemn. "Got the room ready for you, Mrs. Murphy. Top floor, back corner. No one will find you there unless they know to look." "Thank you, Mrs. Owens," Theodora said gratefully. "Anything for you and the boy," the older woman replied, patting Liam's shoulder. "And for our sheriff, now come along, I'll show you up." The room was small but clean, with a double bed and a trundle that could be pulled out for Liam. The window overlooked the back alley rather than the main street, and heavy curtains could be drawn across it for privacy. "I've brought up some supper for you, Mrs. Owens said, indicating a covered tray on the small table. "And there's fresh water in the pitcher for washing." Adam thanked her and asked her to send word if any strangers entered the hotel. When she had gone, he turned to Theodora. "I need to get back to the office. Deputy Jenkins will be stationed in the hallway all night. Don't open the door for anyone but me or Mrs. Owens." "What's going to happen?" Theodora asked quietly, mindful of Liam examining the room with interest. "Detective Warren and I are going to try to resolve this peacefully," Adam replied, though his expression suggested he didn't hold much hope for that outcome. "Caldwell and his men have warrants out for their arrest. If they surrender, they'll be taken to the territorial prison to await trial." "And if they don't surrender," Adam's eyes hardened, "then we do what's necessary to protect this town and its people." Theodora touched his arm lightly. "Be careful, Adam." He covered her hand with his own, a brief, warm pressure. "I will try to get some rest. I'll come by in the morning to let you know how things stand." After he left, Theodora helped Liam settle in, trying to make their unexpected stay feel like an adventure rather than a necessity born of danger. They ate the simple but hearty meal Mrs. Owens had provided, and Theodora read to Liam from a book they had brought until he fell asleep on the trundle bed, the sheriff's hat still clutched in his hand. Theodora didn't sleep. She sat by the window, peering through a gap in the curtains at the darkened town below. Occasionally, she could see movement deputies patrolling the streets, lights burning in the sheriff's office across the way. Once she caught sight of Adam himself, standing on the boardwalk outside the jail, deep in conversation with the Pinkerton detective. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his stance, the way his hand never strayed far from his gun. It was well past midnight when the sound of raised voices reached her. Theodora moved closer to the window, careful not to disturb the curtains too much. In the dim light of the street lamps, she could make out a group of men on horseback in front of the sheriff's office. Hank Caldwell's deep voice carried through the night air. "Come on out, Fletcher. We got some unfinished business, you and me." Theodora's heart raced as the door to the sheriff's office opened and Adam stepped out onto the boardwalk. Even from her vantage point, she could see he wore his gun belt and carried a rifle. Deputy Jenkins and Detective Warren flanked him, similarly armed. "Caldwell," Adam's voice was steady, authoritative. "You and your men are wanted for train robbery and murder. Throw down your weapons and surrender peacefully." A harsh laugh answered him. "You must take me for a fool, Fletcher. I didn't come all this way to surrender. I came for justice for my brother." "Your brother got justice," Adam replied. "A jury found him guilty. I just did my job." "Your job," Caldwell spat. "Your job cost me my only kin. Now I'm thinking maybe it's time you learned how that feels." There was a pause then. "Where's that pretty woman and the boy, Fletcher? The ones wearing your hat around town like they belong to you?" Theodora's blood ran cold at the direct threat. She looked quickly at Liam, relieved to see he was still sleeping soundly. "They have nothing to do with this, Caldwell." Adam's voice had hardened dangerously. "This is between you and me." "Everything to do with it," Caldwell countered. "A man should know what it's like to lose what matters to him, makes him appreciate the pain he causes others." There was movement on the street as Caldwell's men spread out, their hands hovering near their guns. Theodora counted 5 of them, including Caldwell himself. "Last chance, Caldwell," Adam called. "Surrender now, or this ends badly for you and your men." "I don't think so, Sheriff." "See, we got you outnumbered, and we know where they're hiding the hotel, ain't it? One of my boys saw you taking them there earlier." Theodora's heart nearly stopped. She backed away from the window, her mind racing. If Caldwell's men knew they were in the hotel, she and Liam weren't safe, regardless of Deputy Jenkins' standing guard. What happened next unfolded so quickly that Theodora barely had time to process it. There was a shout, then the deafening crack of gunfire. From her window, she saw flashes of light as shots were exchanged on the street below. She heard men yelling, horses neighing in panic, more gunshots. Without thinking, she ran to Liam, shaking him awake. "Liam, sweetheart, wake up, we need to move." "Mama," he mumbled sleepily. "What's happening?" "There's trouble outside. We need to find a safer place to hide." She helped him into his shoes, grateful that they had slept fully dressed just in case. A sharp knock at the door made her freeze. "Mrs. Murphy, it's Jenkins. Sheriff says to get you out the back way. Caldwell's men are coming." Theodora grabbed their small bag of belongings and took Liam's hand. "We're coming." Deputy Jenkins was pale but composed as he led them down the back stairs of the hotel to a service entrance. "Sheriff's drawing their fire out front," he explained as they hurried through the darkened hallway. "Mrs. Owens says there's a root cellar behind the kitchen. You can hide there until it's over." The hotel kitchen was deserted at this late hour, lit only by the dying embers in the large stove. Mrs. Owens was waiting for them, a lantern in hand. "This way, quickly," she urged, leading them through the back door into a small yard. A wooden trapdoor in the ground stood open, revealing steps leading down into darkness. "It's not comfortable, but it's safe. No one will think to look for you there." Theodora guided Liam down the steps, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. The root cellar was cool and earthy smelling, lined with shelves of preserves and root vegetables. Mrs. Owens handed down the lantern. "Stay quiet as mice," she whispered. "I'll come for you when the sheriff says it's safe." The trapdoor closed, leaving them in the dim light of the single lantern. Liam pressed against Theodora's side, his eyes wide with fear now that he was fully awake. "Are those bad men trying to hurt us, Mama?" he asked in a small voice. Theodora put her arm around him, drawing him close. They're trying to hurt Sheriff Fletcher and they think hurting us would do that, but we're safe here and the sheriff knows how to handle men like them. Because he's brave, Liam said with absolute conviction. Yes, he is very brave. Theodora listened intently, but the sounds of gunfire had stopped. She didn't know if that was a good sign or a terrible one. And so are you, Liam. You're being so brave right now. They sat in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one. Liam eventually dozed off against her shoulder, exhausted by the disruption to his sleep and the tension of their situation. Theodora remained alert, straining to hear any sound from above that might indicate what was happening. When the trapdoor finally opened, Theodora instinctively pulled Liam behind her, relaxing only when she saw Adam's familiar face peering down at them. "It's all over," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "You can come up now." In the lantern light, Theodora could see a dark stain on his sleeve that looked suspiciously like blood. "Are you hurt?" "It's nothing. A graze." Adam reached down to help them up the steps. "Liam, you all right, son?" Liam nodded, clutching the sheriff's hat that he had somehow managed to keep with him through everything. "Did you catch the bad men?" A shadow crossed Adam's face. "Some of them. Caldwell and one of his men got away. The others won't be troubling anyone again." Theodora understood what he wasn't saying in front of Liam. There had been deaths tonight. She saw it in the grim set of Adam's mouth, the weariness in his eyes. "What happens now?" she asked as they walked back through the kitchen. Mrs. Owens was waiting with cups of hot coffee for the adults and milk for Liam. "Detective Warren is organizing a posse to go after Caldwell at first light," Adam replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I'll be leading it." "But you're injured," Theodora protested. "Like I said, it's just a graze." "Doc Martin already patched it up." Adam's eyes met hers over the rim of his cup. "I need to finish this, Theodora. As long as Caldwell is out there, you and Liam aren't safe." She knew he was right, but the thought of him riding out to confront that dangerous man again filled her with dread. "How long will you be gone?" "Hard to say. We'll follow their trail as far as we need to." He set down his cup and knelt in front of Liam. "I need you to look after your mother while I'm gone, Deputy. Can you do that for me?" Liam straightened, his expression solemn. "Yes, sir, I'll protect her." "Good man." Adam gently adjusted the hat on Liam's head. "Keep this safe for me too, all right? I'll want it back when I return. You promise you'll come back?" Liam asked, a tremor in his voice betraying his fear. "I promise." Adam looked up at Theodora, his gaze steady and determined. "I have too much to come back for." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. There was more than duty driving him now. There was something personal, something that had to do with her and Liam. Mrs. Owens cleared her throat. "You two should try to get some rest," she said to Theodora and Liam. "You can stay in the hotel as long as you need to, on the house." "Thank you, Mrs. Owens," Theodora said sincerely. "You've been so kind." "Nonsense. We take care of our own in Timber Creek." The older woman's gaze flickered between Theodora and Adam with knowing eyes. "Always have, always will." Adam walked them back to their room, his hand occasionally brushing against Theodora's as if he needed the reassurance of her presence. Deputy Jenkins had been relieved by another man who nodded respectfully as they passed. At the door to their room, Adam hesitated. "I should let you get some sleep. Dawn's not far off. When do you leave?" Theodora asked, not ready for him to go just yet. "As soon as the posse is assembled." "An hour, maybe 2. Liam had already gone inside, too tired to keep his eyes open any longer. Theodora stood in the doorway, suddenly afraid that this might be the last time she saw Adam Fletcher. Men who went after outlaws didn't always come back. "Adam," she began, then faltered, unsure how to express the tumult of emotions she was feeling. He seemed to understand without her needing to find the words. Gently, he took her hand in his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I meant what I said, Theodora. I have too much to come back for." Before she could respond, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was both tender and fiercely protective. It was brief, just a moment of connection, but it conveyed everything neither of them had found the courage to say aloud. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers. "I should have asked permission." "You have it," Theodora whispered, her heart racing. "Then and now." A smile touched his lips, softening the weariness in his face. "When I get back, we have things to talk about, you and I." "Yes, we do," she touched his cheek lightly. "Be careful, Adam." "Come back to us." "I will." He stepped back, his hand going to where his hat would normally be. Finding it missing, he smiled ruefully. "Keep my deputy safe until I return. With my life," Theodora promised. After he left, Theodora checked on Liam, who had fallen asleep fully dressed on the bed, the sheriff's hat still clutched in his hands. She gently removed his shoes and covered him with a blanket, then went to the window. The street below was quiet now, though she could see men moving with purpose around the sheriff's office, preparing for the manhunt to come. As dawn broke over Timber Creek, Theodora watched Adam emerge from the jailhouse, leading his horse. Detective Warren and 6 other men waited for him, all armed and grim-faced. They mounted up and rode out of town as the first rays of sunlight touched the buildings, casting long shadows behind them. Theodora pressed her hand to the window, a silent prayer for their safe return, for Adam's safe return rising in her heart. The next 3 days were the longest of Theodora's life. She and Liam remained at the hotel, though they ventured downstairs for meals after the first day. The town was subdued, everyone waiting anxiously for news of the posse. Deputy Jenkins kept them informed of what little information came in. The posse had tracked Caldwell and his remaining man into the foothills to the east, but beyond that, there was only silence. Liam was restless, missing his routine and worried about Adam despite Theodora's reassurances. He carried the sheriff's hat everywhere, refusing to let it out of his sight, and spent hours at the window watching the street for any sign of the returning riders. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Theodora was helping Mrs. Owens with some mending in the hotel parlor when Liam, who had been stationed at the window as usual, suddenly leaped to his feet. "They're back. Mama, they're back," he shouted, racing for the door. Theodora dropped her sewing and followed, her heart in her throat. From the hotel porch, she could see riders approaching down the main street, dust rising from their horses' hooves. As they drew closer, she searched frantically for Adam's familiar figure among them. There at the front of the group was Adam Fletcher, his posture straight despite obvious exhaustion. Beside him rode Detective Warren, and between them, slumped on his horse with his hands bound, was Hank Caldwell. Theodora's knees nearly gave way with relief. He had come back, just as he promised. Liam was already running down the street, the sheriff's hat bobbing on his head. "Sheriff Fletcher, Sheriff Fletcher," Adam reined in his horse, a weary smile breaking across his face as he saw Liam racing toward him. He dismounted stiffly, favoring his injured arm. Theodora noted and crouched down just in time to catch Liam as the boy threw himself into his arms. "You came back," Liam said, his voice muffled against Adam's shoulder. "I promised I would, didn't I?" Adam replied, holding the boy close for a moment before setting him back on his feet. "And I see you've kept my hat safe for me." "I didn't let it out of my sight, not once," Liam declared proudly. By now, Theodora had reached them, her eyes taking in Adam's appearance. He was dusty and unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes, speaking of little sleep during the pursuit. But he was alive and whole, and that was all that mattered. "Theodora," he said softly, his gaze holding hers. "Sheriff," she replied, conscious of the townspeople gathering around them. "We're glad to see you back safe." "It's over," he told her, his meaning clear. "Caldwell will stand trial for his crimes. You and Liam are safe now." Detective Warren approached, leading the bound Caldwell. "Sheriff, we should get the prisoner secured." Adam nodded, his expression turning professional again. "Of course." He turned back to Theodora and Liam. "I need to take care of this, but after. We'll be at home," Theodora said, understanding. "Whenever you're ready." It was nearly evening when Adam finally appeared at their door. He had bathed and changed clothes, though the weariness remained etched in his features. Theodora had prepared a simple supper, knowing he would be hungry after his journey. Liam greeted him exuberantly, pulling him inside to show him how they had arranged everything back exactly as it was before they left. "And I kept your hat right here," he said, pointing to the hook by the door where he had carefully hung it. "So I see," Adam said, smiling at the boy's pride. You've done an excellent job as my deputy, Liam. They ate together, Adam recounting a carefully edited version of the pursuit and capture that omitted the more dangerous details. Caldwell and his remaining man had hidden in an abandoned mining camp in the foothills, but a local trapper had spotted them and brought word to the posse. They had surrounded the outlaws at dawn, and after a brief exchange of gunfire, Caldwell had surrendered when he realized he was outnumbered and outflanked. Detective Warren will escort him to Cheyenne tomorrow, Adam concluded. He'll stand trial there for the train robberies and murders. And the other man? Theodora asked. A shadow crossed Adam's face. He didn't surrender, made a poor choice. Theodora nodded, understanding what he wasn't saying in front of Liam. After supper, Adam helped Liam practice his reading, listening patiently as the boy sounded out words from his school primer. Theodora watched them together, her heart full at the natural ease between them, the gentle encouragement Adam offered, the way Liam looked up at him with admiration and trust. When it was time for Liam to go to bed, he asked Adam to tell him a story. A true one, he specified. About when you were a lawman in Colorado. Adam thought for a moment, then began a tale about tracking a lost child through the mountains during a snowstorm. It was exciting enough to capture Liam's imagination, but ended happily with the child's safe return to his parents. Is that really true? Liam asked sleepily as Adam finished the story. Every word, Adam promised. Now, time to sleep, deputy. You've had a long few days. Are you going to stay? Liam asked, his eyes already closing. Adam glanced at Theodora, a question in his gaze. She nodded slightly, her heart quickening at what that simple permission implied. Yes, Liam, Adam said softly. I'm staying. After Liam had fallen asleep, Adam and Theodora sat together at the small table, cups of coffee before them. For a moment, neither spoke, the events of the past few days hanging between them. I thought you might not come back, Theodora finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Adam reached across the table to take her hand. I made a promise to you and Liam. I don't make promises I don't intend to keep. What happens now? She asked, the question encompassing far more than just the aftermath of Caldwell's capture. Adam's thumb traced patterns on her palm, much as it had done that night at the hotel. That depends on you, Theodora, on me. Yes. His gray eyes held her steadily. I've made my feelings clear, I think, but I won't presume to know yours. Theodora took a deep breath. My feelings are complicated. I never expected to feel this way again, especially not after. She trailed off, but Adam understood. After Liam's father, he finished for her. I know your trust isn't easily given, Theodora. I don't take that lightly. It's not just about trust, she said, struggling to articulate the tangle of emotions within her. It's about Liam, about what's best for him. He's already attached to you, Adam, if we don't. If we don't work out, he'll be hurt, Adam nodded. I understand that fear, but Theodora, I need you to know something. He tightened his grip on her hand. I'm not just passing through. What I feel for you and Liam, it's not temporary. When I put that hat on his head and told him he had a father now, I meant it. Not just for that moment, but for as long as you'll both have me. Theodora's heart seemed to stop, then race forward. Adam, are you saying? I'm saying I love you, Theodora Murphy. You and Liam both. I'm saying I want to be a husband to you and a father to him if you'll let me. Tears filled Theodora's eyes. She had never expected to hear those words again, had resigned herself to raising Liam alone, to living her life without the kind of partnership other women took for granted. I don't need an answer tonight, Adam continued, his voice gentle. I know this is sudden, and after everything that's happened, yes, Theodora interrupted, the word bursting from her heart before her mind could caution restraint. Adam stilled. Yes, I'll let you, yes, I want that too, she gripped his hand tightly. I love you, Adam Fletcher. I think I have since the moment you put your hat on my son's head and stood up for him when no one else would. The smile that broke across Adam's face was like sunrise after the longest night. He rose from his chair and came around the table, pulling Theodora to her feet and into his arms. Are you sure? He asked, his face inches from hers. I'm not exactly an easy man to love. The badge comes with danger, with enemies like Caldwell. I'm sure, Theodora replied, her arms going around his neck. The badge is part of who you are, and I love who you are, Adam Fletcher. This time when he kissed her, there was no hesitation, no brevity. It was a kiss that spoke of promise and passion, of a future being written with every breath they shared. Theodora melted into him, feeling for the first time in years that she had found home not in a place, but in a person. When they finally broke apart, Adam rested his forehead against hers. What do you think Liam will say? Theodora laughed softly. I think he's been hoping for this since the day you gave him your hat. He's been telling everyone who'll listen that you're his pa now. Smart boy, Adam murmured, pressing another kiss to her lips. Takes after his mother. The following Sunday, Theodora and Liam sat in the front pew of Timber Creek's small church beside Adam. It was the first time they had attended services together, and Theodora was acutely aware of the curious glances and whispered conversations their appearance generated. But for once, she didn't mind the attention. There was nothing shameful in being seen with Adam Fletcher, in having her son sit proudly between them wearing the sheriff's hat that had come to symbolize so much more than a simple gesture of kindness. After the service, Reverend Johnson approached them, his hand extended to Adam. Sheriff, good to see you and Mrs. Murphy here together. The Lord's house is always open to families seeking his blessing. Thank you, Reverend, Adam replied, shaking the man's hand. Speaking of blessings, we were hoping to speak with you about performing a wedding ceremony. The Reverend's eyebrows rose slightly, but his smile remained warm. I'd be honored, Sheriff. When were you thinking? Adam looked to Theodora, who answered, 2 weeks from today, if that's possible. We don't want anything elaborate. 2 weeks it is, then, Reverend Johnson agreed. We can discuss the details later this week. As they walked home from church, Liam skipping ahead of them down the dusty street, Theodora felt Adam's hand find hers. Are you sure you don't want to wait longer? He asked. Give people time to get used to the idea, Theodora shook her head. I've spent too many years worrying about what people think. 2 weeks is plenty of time to prepare a simple wedding, unless you're having second thoughts. Not a chance, Adam replied firmly. If it were up to me, we'd be married today. 2 weeks will pass quickly, Theodora promised, squeezing his hand, and then we have the rest of our lives. The rest of our lives, Adam repeated, as if savoring the words. I like the sound of that. Ahead of them, Liam had stopped to wait, the sheriff's hat tilted at a jaunty angle on his head. As they approached, he looked up at them with an expression of such pure happiness that Theodora felt her heart might burst. Sheriff Fletcher says I can call him Pa after you get married, Liam announced. Is that all right, Mama? Theodora exchanged a glance with Adam, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, Liam, she said, her voice thick with emotion. That's more than all right. Liam beamed and took both their hands, swinging between them as they continued down the street toward home, not just the small house that had sheltered Theodora and Liam for 6 years, but the home they would make together, the three of them, a family bound not by blood but by something even stronger. Choice, love, and the promise of a future built on both. 2 weeks later, on a perfect spring afternoon, Theodora Murphy became Theodora Fletcher in a simple ceremony at the Timber Creek Church. She wore a new dress of pale blue silk, a gift from the women of the town who had pitched in to buy the fabric and carried wildflowers gathered that morning by Liam. Adam wore his best suit, his badge polished to a shine on his chest. Liam stood beside them, proudly bearing the rings on a small cushion sewn by Mrs. Owens, the sheriff's hat temporarily set aside for the solemn occasion. When Reverend Johnson pronounced them husband and wife and Adam leaned down to kiss his bride, Liam let out a whoop of joy that made the entire congregation laugh. After the ceremony, the town gathered for a celebration in the churchyard. There was food and music, laughter and dancing. Mrs. Peterson, who had once looked at Theodora with barely disguised disapproval, now embraced her warmly, declaring that she had always known Theodora Murphy was a woman of quality. Miss Hayes danced with Liam, praising his reading progress and promising that she would have new, more challenging books for him when school resumed in the fall. Deputy Jenkins raised a toast to the sheriff and his new family, declaring that Timber Creek was fortunate to have such fine people looking after its welfare. As the sun began to set, casting golden light over the celebration, Adam drew Theodora away from the crowd for a moment of privacy behind the church. "Mrs. Fletcher," he said, his arms encircling her waist. "Are you happy?" Theodora looked up at her husband. Her heart so full she could scarcely contain it. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Good." Adam kissed her softly, "because this is just the beginning." From around the corner of the church came Liam's voice calling for them. "Mama, Pa, come quick, they're cutting the cake." Adam laughed, taking Theodora's hand. "Duty calls, Mrs. Fletcher." "Lead the way, Sheriff," she replied, following him back to the celebration, to their son, to the life they would build together. As they rejoined the party, Liam ran to meet them, the sheriff's hat once again firmly on his head. He grabbed both their hands, pulling them toward the cake table where Mrs. Owens was waiting with a knife. "The whole family should cut it together," Liam declared, positioning himself between them. Adam placed his hand over Theodora's on the knife handle, and Liam put his small hand on top. Together, they cut the first slice of their wedding cake, a symbol of the sweetness they would share in the years to come. Looking around at the smiling faces of the townspeople who had once whispered behind her back, but now celebrated her happiness, Theodora felt the last of her old fears and doubts melt away. She had found not just love but acceptance, not just a husband but a true partner, not just a father for her son but a man who had chosen them both with his whole heart. And it had all begun with a simple act of kindness, a cowboy placing his hat on the head of a boy who needed to know he mattered, who needed to believe he belonged. In that moment, Adam Fletcher had given Liam far more than a hat. He had given him pride, protection, and ultimately, a promise that would last a lifetime. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky above Timber Creek, Theodora watched her husband and son laughing together and knew with absolute certainty that this family they had created, this love they had found against all odds, was the greatest blessing she could have ever imagined. And when Adam caught her watching them and smiled, his gray eyes filled with love and promise, Theodora smiled back, her heart finally, completely at peace.